Hello and welcome to Ungimmicked. You do that better.
Yeah, we need my voice. We need my voice. Hello and welcome to Ungimmicked. Emphasis on the ED. Because I've gotten more comments about that. They keep coming.
All the comments from us, by the way, but please comment below about it.
We are joined today by the whole crew. I have on studio with me Alex Moreau. We have Connor McDonald, Matthew O'Neill, Sanjeev Vinod over Zoom. My name is Gonzalo Souza. And we are here for another week, another episode. And we are going to be talking about... what are we going to be talking about, Alex? This is a convoluted topic that I would rather you explain than me try to.
This is such a complicated topic. I had to come all the way to Pasadena to explain it.
From DC, yeah.
So today, I essentially want us to talk about the following quote. To a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I can hear head scratching through our future viewers here.
What the f*** is
Let
this
me
guy saying?
Let me explain a little more. People that dedicated their lives to an art, a craft, or basically anything, change their perspective of the world. Of course, everyone does. It's not inherently a bad thing, but it seems that musicians experience the world more finely and more subtly through sound, and magicians, of course, through the lens of magic. Now, today, I want us to share our experiences so we can all realize how much we don't realize. Let's try and scratch that surface and have a general discussion about making the most out of that perspective without falling victim into the biggest pitfalls, maybe having tunnel vision. And now, to be completely honest, this is probably a discussion that's more fit for a psychologist than five random magicians. But you're all aware that we're all here to tackle some hard subjects and some very interesting subjects. So, let's start by stating the obvious here. We're just five idiots.
Yes, we
that's
are.
something I like saying. I think it's really accurate. And we're just trying to cross our experiences and make the most out of the discussion. And our views and opinions are just as valid or invalid as anyone else's. So I stated the obvious. So now, let's start talking.
There you go.
For part one, I named part one Hammering the World Away.
Poetic.
I know, I was just going to say, that is
Very
poetic.
nice.
Jeez.
I like it.
So here I want us to talk about us magicians watching the world through the lens of magic. And there may be two small pointers I wrote down, which is one, drawing inspiration, and two, finding moments. Now, instantly, as soon as I say drawing inspiration from the world, I'm sure that rings a million bells. Maybe we can go off of someone's experience right now.
Of course it does. Of course it rings bells. It's that idea that there's two types of the drawing inspiration. I do it in two, or I think it can be done in two forms, actively or passively.
Yes.
You can either actively think, oh, this is a really cool thing, I really like this concept, and you try to apply it and you work with it, or passively, as throughout the day you're retaining information and then something could just hit you, and that's the light bulb moment. The active one is a little bit more interesting to talk about. Of course, where you can see something, you see. I'll give a personal example that just happened last week. I was on a hike with a couple friends, and a guy friend of my friend. So I was talking to him, getting to know him, and find out that he does some painting. And he was talking about like, oh yeah, because this is one principle that I learned last summer, or whatever. Like, look at this plant. What color is it? And I was like, oh, green. And he's like, well, yeah, sure, it's green, but if you get a brush and you paint it green, well, then that's not very interesting because that's not its color. It also has a little bit of yellow, a little bit of brown, a couple shades of black and white on the sides. That was something that I was like, oh,
Yeah.
magic.
Wow,
Boom, put you in
unbelievable.
place.
Wow.
No, but it was one of those moments that I was like, this is magical in some way that I don't know yet. I don't know what's magical about this or what I want to make about this magical, but there is something. So immediately, even hearing about this guy that I had just met who was painting, I was like, magic. Boom.
So you saw through your lens the fact that he was seeing through his own lens.
Exactly.
So it's like a lensception.
Interesting.
A little
Yeah.
bit meta.
Lensception, I like it.
That's cool. That's really cool.
That's wonderful. Now, objectively, I think it's fair to say that this guy is a better painter to the fact that he recognizes that. I think it's very fair to say, although I know nothing about painting. Now let's talk about magic. And that's where it becomes tough, and that's the very reason I want to talk about it.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
now we don't really get to see colors and say, hey, magic trick. We don't even get to see anything and say, hey, magic, unless it's very rare occurrences. So now us magicians, I believe, have to go through an extra step and go, oh, this could be an image, this could be a moment, and from there you create something else. So I just want to talk about drawing inspiration. Maybe where can you draw inspiration from? And although that was a complete episode, I'm just talking specifically of watching the world as a magician.
I mean, again, I think it comes from weirdly everywhere, right? I can be
Random
having,
places.
I know, stuff you wouldn't expect. Like Seinfeld is a show that I watched a bunch as a kid. So I watched the whole show before I became a magician.
My favorite
And
anime.
one day I was did you say it's your favorite anime?
Yeah.
I hate you, Matt. So one day I was sitting and Seinfeld has this whole pitch that it's a show about nothing. I was like, oh, what would a card trick about nothing look like? Too many card tricks are presented as if they're about nothing already, I think. But truly a trick where magic happens, but it's about nothing. And that was the point of inspiration. Movies,
I like that.
TV. I see an image. I'm walking and I see something and I'm like, oh, there's a feeling there. Gonzalo texts me sometimes too. He's like, there's this song and it makes me feel this way. And I want to put it in magic, but I don't know what the feeling is or what the magic would be. And I'm like, dude, yes, this
Perfect.
is where we start.
Because it's nothing, it can be anything.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a very seed of a starting point.
It's like a blank
right?
canvas
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
most literal
absolutely.
sense of the word.
It's very
Yeah.
weird. I in my head, I'm trying to think of examples where I saw something in the outside world and I said, I looked at it through a magician's lens.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like by actively trying to think of an example, I feel like I'm almost blind to it because I'm the one who does the thinking. And I feel like you almost have to be outside of the bubble to be able to look at it
Very good point.
Yeah.
and point that. I feel like I'm struggling.
A good way to do it is through other art forms. A good way to find it, because you sort of see what they're doing and magic has the unique ability to be it's interactive theater, essentially. It's what a way to give parameters to what magic is. And I can give you an example that Alex helped me with on a routine I'm working on. For example, I heard this poem by Alexander Pushkin, and there was a guy who performed it in like the 80s in Russia back in the day, and he performed it, and it was one of the most moving performances I've ever heard. But he did a Russian poem in the Russian and its French translation, and he switched back and forth between the languages, and it was ridiculous. It was crazy, and the poem is very, very intense.
Mm-hmm.
I was deeply moved by it to the point where like I wanted to think, you know what? I want to recite this poem that is extremely dramatic because I speak both French and Russian. I want to recite this poem, and then due to its dramatic nature, I want something dramatic to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the seed for creating something cool. And the poem piece that sort of came from that came from me seeing something that I felt deeply.
I think that relates to what I was saying in terms of you talk about arts. When the guy that I was talking to was talking about painting, that's another art. But the most interesting to me is when random things can spark that thing. And Connor, you were talking about the outside world. And I think you've tipped this before, Sanjeev. I think you've tipped this before on the podcast. If you haven't, I'll make sure to cut it out. But Control Z, and you know where I'm going to go with this.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that and another thing too. I usually actively avoid personal examples, but I think here that is what we're talking about. And Crayola was the first piece that popped into my head because it came from a box of Crayola markers sitting on my desk. And then I looked at it and I was like, why do you have to uncap it to color? Which is the dumbest question. Absolute dumbest question. But I think that was really from the lens of a magician, where we have these plots that we so casually throw around, like, oh, color changing deck. Okay, shake change here. Okay, shapeshifter here. And even the most normal objects, normal things in quotes, that are coloring implements, to me will always be a physical manifestation of a magic plot. Control Z came from sitting and thinking, okay, a keyboard shortcut. What if we did in life? I don't know. It was another very weird out there question. But I think forever I will And I'm okay with this. This isn't, I think, the worst loss. I see things as first when something strikes me, I think one of my first thoughts, if not one of the first few, is, could this be magic? Is there something here?
Interesting formula. You see something, and it makes you think for a second, and then you go, what if?
Yeah.
What if this happened? And then that's what magicians do. We literally take an idea, and then we go, what if this, what if this, what if this, what if
and in
this?
fact, I love your approach on Jeev, because you're not talking about, like, of course you can do this with art or some crazy thing where you had a genius and someone had a genius inspiration. But I love the fact you're doing the very opposite. You're taking random objects. And I think early in this podcast, very early in the podcast, we were talking about properties of an object. Yes, I did with a playing card there. Here, let's take a pen. This is a pen.
Yeah.
You could stop there, or you could go for the next 3 hours going, okay, this is round, this is slightly thicker than here. This bar is this length. Why is it not shorter? Why is it longer? It has this curve. Could it be a sharper angle? Could it be how do you say acute? Acute is English?
I think acute is English.
Acute angle.
You have the two foreigners sitting next to each other.
Right. So all I'm saying is, at some point, realizing how much you overlook is a wonderful thing, because we're just so used to seeing things. Maybe also that phenomena where people driving home sometimes, like you drive home to work and back every single day, and some days you just go out of your house and suddenly you're at work and you don't remember yourself going. Well, all those things, all those informations, your brain just sort of puts to the side, say this is not important. So maybe there is a way to take that hammer out and just start over hammering things and just see how they respond to the hammering. And if they respond to, if they sound empty, like, this might not be interesting. Then suddenly, if you take them as empty, you casually slam it, but it sounds compact. Like, oh, there is more to it. Dun, 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 and eventually,
how far can I push this nail into the wood?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One thing that I
O'Connor, you go.
One thing that I like doing that I've been doing recently is that there's an antique shop and a thrift store like right around the block from my house.
That's a good place.
So what I do, like what I tend to do a lot, is just walk to the antique thrift store and look at everything individually and just think, and do exactly what you guys said. What if this were a magic trick, right? And what I like doing about that, obviously you could do that in your house with like a pen, a wallet, anything. But what I like about going to the thrift store is that I'm presented with objects that I don't see every day. Sometimes objects that I've never seen before, and I have to create something. I have no idea what this object is. You know, I remember one time I found this very weird little box, and there's a little thing to spin it on the side. Yeah, a little crank, and then a little clown jumped up and started dancing.
Wow.
And I'd never seen. I was just thinking, how could that be a magic trick? Because it was just so old and so much history. I don't know. I think everyone should try that.
Yeah, and related to what you were just saying, and this will be 30 seconds. I've tipped it before, so I don't feel bad tipping it now. You said a thrift store. You could go to a bookstore, look at the covers of books, see how those can inspire you. I think I mentioned this in the we mentioned it in the inspiration episode, which I think this discussion is getting too close to. So I'm going to ask Alex to maybe guide this.
I indeed think this is. I mean, it's very subtle differences here, but indeed we're very much talking about drawing inspiration, of which we've already done one full episode. I just wanted to get back to Matthew saying seeing other art form, and there's one thing that I absolutely love drawing parallels to with magic is surrealism, because isn't magic like inherently surrealist? I'm not sure. Probably no, not inherently, but when you watch an image and like of a surrealist painting, going, what?
Why?
I want to do that.
Yeah.
And not that, but I want to express in people the idea of what. And I think that all those different inspirations you draw and eventually put inside your show, they paint a certain picture for your audience, which is a picture of your cultural background, your social background, etc. So I just want to deal a little bit with that with you guys. For instance, Sanjeev, do you think? Yes. Let's go back a couple years here, and let's create a carbon copy of Sanjeev right before he was born. But we move it to, let's say, Russia, completely randomly. Now, totally you two live the exact same, like you always think the same thing and everything, but just the inherent differences in culture and everything bring you to become magicians. You do the same moves to the same level of proficiency. But how different are you really?
Drastically, man. What? I think
Yeah,
it's
Let's
yeah.
push on that.
behaviorism. Is that the behaviorism? Oh, it'd be so sad if I was wrong. Is I believe the psychological philosophy school of thought that we are so dramatically colored almost purely by our experiences, by what we go through. And first of all, even the possibility of both me and Carbon Copy becoming magicians, I think, is already an insane coincidence. But beyond that, I would say our upbringing, our experiences, both socially, both intellectually, emotionally, all that shaped who I am in magic, right? I mean, the simplest example is I draw so much inspiration, especially now in this stage of my magic learning, from Indian scripture, right? That's something I read, and there's just the most insane ideas there. The seed metaphor in there is like, okay, if you cut open a seed, what do you see inside? You see nothing, but that nothing has the chance to grow into everything. And I think that's just, what is happening? What is this? Right? That's, to me, such an inspiration. And if even in these little ways, if I draw inspiration from a body of work that's so closely tied to specifically the way I was brought up, it's not just me being Indian either. There are so many Indians who do not have interest in this stuff. It's the fact that I was lucky enough to be born Indian, lucky enough to have a background in Sanskrit, lucky enough to be exposed to these works. All those came together to bring this into my magic, right? And I really believe that, at least for me, I would love my magic to be an extension of who I am. And if my identity is different, I believe my magic would be drastically different as well.
Connor, I think you had something to say.
Well, it reminded me of this study that I was reading. It was a while ago. It's a few months ago, but what happened was they took a few people from English-speaking countries and a few people from Spanish-speaking countries, and they gave them a set of objects, and they said, sort these objects into categories. And the people from English-speaking countries sorted them in categories of like color, right? It's like, oh, well, these ones were yellow, this one was green, right? But then people from Spanish-speaking countries would group them together by how the female and male pronoun.
Yeah,
like
the
how
fact.
they,
Yeah,
Oh, that's
if they're male
interesting.
or female.
So
like
It's
if
not a
they're
concept in the English
masculine or
language.
feminine.
yeah.
and it was, like,
English
within
doesn't
language.
have that
Yeah.
duality.
Yeah.
English is,
And it's
is
just
singular
like
to that.
where you grow up, the language that you speak totally affects the way you perceive the world. The art that you like totally changes the way you see things.
That is beautiful. And in fact, if I'm just pushing to the initial metaphor, eventually maybe what you want to bring up to people is not to show you're a hammer, but to show all the dents in your hammer that's been thwacking things left and right.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you're experiencing a concept and you're giving it some thought and some action, it shapes you a little bit. And eventually, it's the you shaped by all these different experiences that comes onto stage. And now maybe we can make a quick word about how explicit or implicit you want that to be as a performer. Do you want to
Yeah.
be the performance completely about you, about what you've done, or about let's talk a little bit about that.
I mean, that's a big thing that I think we're all going through. Especially, I would argue, from starting to read The Jerks. I think, to me, that's been a huge, literally an existential crisis. Like, it makes
That
me
changed
question
all of
my
us.
magic
I'm
every
100%
day.
sure that we
Yeah.
are different people.
Yeah, and I'm glad we
Probably.
got to bring it up again, because I fear that somehow we have some listeners who have not already started reading The Jerks. Please do. And this idea of magician-centric versus audience-centric, and at least to me, what I'm gravitating towards a lot more now is, rather than saying, hi, this is who I am, this is what I've done, I'd like to create an experience that speaks to something else, that talks about something else, and through that, implicitly, you also begin to understand who I am. Like, rather than me saying, oh, I speak these languages, I talk about a piece about languages in general, and somewhere in there, maybe it's intertwined implicitly, or you come up and ask me after the show, oh, you talked about languages, what languages do you speak? And I think that is also a way to go about it, right? So I would say that
Talk
now,
like a real person.
yeah, that is how real people do it, exactly. And I think now I am starting to give a personal experience, gravitate more towards I love implicit, I love subtle, and I think that also gives you the opportunity to often inject more meaning into your performances, because that space, that volume is not occupied by what you are trying to say explicitly about yourself. That's a personal take.
That's a beautiful way to see it.
I think it is. Yeah, and it's you were talking about the subtle, and I'm sorry. I know we did 2 parts on art, but I think art is in the nuance. It's in those little bits. So me and you, Sanjeev, we've talked at length about this, and it is. It's in the details.
Dude,
Do
we
you know
should
what I
get
thought-
married.
do you know
dude.
what I thought you were gonna
Should
say,
just get
Gonzalo?
married. Huh?
I mean,
I
no.
thought he was-
Actually, sorry. This is more important, Matthew. Please, if you're considering getting married to me, please do. Citizenship would be a blessing right
yeah.
now.
I can tell.
So,
You're so
Yeah.
biased. It's pathetic.
Talk about being subtle, right? And well, Gonzalo said, speaking of being subtle, I thought he was gonna go follow us on social media.
that's what I'm going to do just right now, because we've reached our break. Social media. It's facebook.com/ungimmick. But the best one is Instagram @ungimmick. You can listen to this podcast on all your podcasting platforms: Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Google, TuneIn. I think we're on that as well.
Yeah,
I think
Google
we're on.
Podcasts.
I submitted the thing for Google
TuneIn.
Podcasts. They better have approved this.
That's whack.
For the 3
or-
people who listen to Google Podcasts.
Yeah.
Or you can listen to it on YouTube.
See
youtube.com/ungimmick.
our beautiful faces.
Amen.
And this time only 4 frames because again I keep mentioning it because I'm just so happy I have
Yeah,
Alex on
awesome.
studio with me. Lastly, there is our Patreon where you can more closely support our work. Patreon.com/ungimmick. If you could stop by, we would really appreciate it. We love bringing you this content, and of course we want to raise the quality, raise the standards, and your help would be very much appreciated. With that,
we need a thing here, and
thing?
I would probably
Do
just
we
say
really?
do
yeah, I
we
think
still
we
need a
do.
thing? You
I
want
think
to?
we do.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a thing?
I would just say that time is money, and the time that we spend coming up with these things actually costs us, and we would like to have that.
Wow,
paid.
talk about being subtle. I would have said just. I would have said just buy Sanjeev a plane ticket to come to like Arrowhead.
Yeah, that would have been a nice
Interesting.
one.
That's brutal.
That would have
Interesting.
been a nice one.
Can I change my request?
No
Yeah,
refund.
Gonzalo,
Sorry,
take it away.
Sanjeev.
Also, for those of you watching, look, it's covered now from the last episode.
Yo! Oh,
I did cover
Connor
it. I'm not
did
sure you
it.
noticed me pick up
That's
and
crazy.
The funds
Yeah,
have
they
already
covered my
worked.
window.
Wow.
So they're kicking in. It's working. We will give you what you want, or what we say that you want.
Well, gentlemen, we have a breather crimp to go to.
Gentlemen.
And Connor, that's all on you today.
Yeah. So I think this week's breather crimp is going to be really interesting because I want to talk about like a resource that not that I just found out about, but I think would be really useful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually a podcast called
Interesting.
Ungimmicked. Boom. Recommending the podcast,
Subtlety,
right?
subtlety,
I think that
subtlety.
everyone
Okay, so
should
subtlety
go
is
ahead
out the
and
window.
listen to this podcast.
So after all these social media plugs, we have a plug.
Yeah.
Yes, that is that's what
Hey,
the one
add- not a
recommendation
plug.
is.
A recommendation.
It is a recommendation that I think everyone should go listen to this podcast. And I seriously recommend that you go and listen to other episodes that you may not have listened to before, because I think this is going to be the 13th episode, hopefully, if everything
We've been
goes
doing
according
this
to
for
plan.
more than 3 months, boys.
More than 3
That's
months.
crazy.
That's a
Insane.
lot of episodes, and they're
that's
all
crazy.
roughly 45 minutes. I mean, if you have nothing to do, or if you do have something to do, just plug it in and listen to the podcast.
You
Seriously.
really were
I
the
recommend
pitch
it
for
to a
this
friend.
breather crimp, were you?
Art is in the
Jeez.
nuance.
Ungimmicked is the nail, and all of us are just hammering it with every single
Hammering it
plug.
in.
Trying our hardest to put it in there. Well, let's bring it back to the discussion then. We had a very poetic first half called "Hammering the World Away." What can we expect in the second half, Alex?
So yeah, the first half was more of a matter of putting some context, making sure we're all very familiar with the metaphor, what's the hammer, what's the nail, and just sort of talk about our personal experiences. So it was a very free-for-all and personal experience. But here, the second part has a little bit less of a poetic title. It's called Watching the Nails. It's like, when you're not hammering those nails, what the hell are you doing? And essentially what that means for us magicians is watching other magic. Now that is something we've been talking about in a couple of episodes, but more here and there, only for points. So today, I would like to take 15 or 20 minutes for us to talk about how magicians watch magic, how painters watch paintings and how musicians listen to music.
Interesting.
And we
It is
touched on it
interesting.
in the last episode of the idea of the magician being the best, easiest audience
Yeah.
That
due
is-
to the
Go,
The
I'm sorry.
easiest, best audience. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, because we like to look at methods. I'm not gonna lie, we find it fascinating. That's a massive foundation of what we do. Even
Yeah.
though obviously it's not all we do, but it's a big part of it. We like to read books. We like to think, oh, why didn't I think of that? That's so smart.
Right.
We love it. So that's a big. It's almost a pitfall when you start looking at your own magic exclusively through the lens of
That's
methods,
a great point.
and then you
Magician
just
So-
point boof.
Maybe
Yeah.
just to put some context, 'cause this is not necessarily easy to understand as a concept for some people listening to us. But us magicians watching magic tricks aren't really watching the same things as you guys are. And a lot of that has been put on national television over the past couple of years when we watch Penn and Teller. And Penn and Teller say it so beautifully, and every time they're sitting in those at the front seats looking at magicians, every time there's a cut to their faces, you can tell they're not watching the same thing as you are. And for us, we look at the differences with what we do or how they're doing what they're doing, as opposed to watching what is accomplished by what they're doing. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think even the public at large has an understanding of that.
That's
I
true.
think last night we were having dinner with my dad, and we had some Juan Tamariz on, and I remember my dad popped the question of, when you guys watch this, are you trying to figure it out? Are you is that what you guys are doing? And so inherently, when looking at there's an understanding, I'm assuming by the public, that when magicians are looking at it, there's more than just enjoying the performance.
Yeah, it's a matter of layers, because I'm sure that, some laymen also try to figure out the tricks,
Of course,
right?
of
And
course.
but it's a matter of how are you looking at that?
But it's also maybe actively versus passively, because a layman watching it who doesn't have an understanding of magic, they'll be watching every little thing, and then they'll be like, okay, what's going on? But maybe a magician, if you can expect the lead-in for a certain phase or a certain aspect or a certain move, you sort of disengage for a second. And that helps if you're trying to fool magicians, because you can lead them into that false sense of security. But it's almost like we passively try to figure it out, and we're really almost happy
Interesting.
when we don't.
That's
Okay.
that's very interesting, and that led to, I'm sorry to take it here, but that led to the infamous 90-10 rule,
Yeah.
and a lot of people have been using it. And for those who are not familiar with it, it's as long as a magician understands 90%, I'm sorry, if a lay audience were to understand 10% of how a trick was done, well, they know how the trick is done. They saw a secret, because they don't know how much they don't know. But when a
They
magician,
feel like they were not fooled.
exactly. But if a magician just doesn't understand those 10%, he's missing a piece of the puzzle. So essentially,
And he'll say
on the
he's
one
fooled.
hand, the audience opening the box with the puzzle pieces is, I know now. But to a magician, as long as that puzzle is incomplete, well, like, I'm missing something.
Yeah.
I really like that
Okay.
puzzle.
That's a good way to
I do
put
like
it.
that.
Really
Yeah.
good way to
Yeah.
put it.
Couple
Even
of
like
things.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. Did you?
I was just gonna say, like, when I explain it to people,
Mhm.
I'm gonna start sort of using that
90-10.
idea, because that's very clear.
Oh yeah.
It is good, yeah. Okay, couple of things. The first thing is something that I don't think fits in Alex's structure for where you wanted this episode to go, so I just want to touch on it quickly. The first thing I thought of when I heard of the quote, to any person with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, at least as a parallel in magic, is that to any magician holding a deck of cards, everyone looks like a spectator. Everyone looks like someone
good
who's
one.
just waiting to see magic.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I guess this is my weekly, monthly PSA rant. I don't know. No. Just
No,
No.
Here.
they don't want to see your stupid
Everyone
card
doesn't
trick.
want to see your magic. No, like, it's... I hate it so much because I see it in myself. And it's just horrible, and it's something that I am working on. But it's difficult, where the moment I just worked on something amazing, even if I'm video calling a friend who I haven't talked to in a couple months and I just want to catch up, my mind's like, oh my god, you should ask them if they want to see a trick. Why aren't they asking if they want to see a trick? Why would they not want to see what amazing things I've created? And this is a foreign concept to any other art form. And I think it might come from the place that Matt mentioned in one of the previous episodes, that the type of people drawn to magic and the specific attitudes that we might have are similar, and that's unfortunate. But yeah, everyone does not want to see your magic trick. Don't try to shoehorn it into every situation. It just ends bad, and you become Magic Boy, and it's pathetic.
You really got to know when it's appropriate.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're wondering, it's probably not. Yeah.
True.
Second point is, I love something Alex said, that as magicians, we don't see the same things as laymen. And I would take it one step further to say that as magicians, we are unable to see things in the same way as laymen do. And again, that is also a premise that's often used, that unfortunately, as a magician, at least I definitely have difficulty doing this. I can't see a performance as a layman anymore. I can't be like, oh, I am just letting it wash over me. I think part of my mind, like Matt mentioned, is, if only passively, working on, oh, what's the method? Okay, it's this phase. And even if it's a temporary lull, there's that. And I initially thought that was horrible for magicians. That's so unfortunate that we have to pay that burden. But imagine another art form. Do stand-up comedians in conversation, are they forced to see every joke that they hear in the lens of, oh, could this be stand-up? Is this bad? That wasn't funny. That was funny. And that would also suck.
Structure. That would.
That would suck to me even worse than only when I see magic shows is when I have to suffer through that. So I think that's also an extension of this blinders mindset and being constrained to that. What would you guys think?
Oh my God. Okay. So I might almost have to disagree with that and say there's little points that can be made for exceptions. For example, say a story is so compelling. For example, the Delgadio show, that story, or I haven't seen Delgadio show. I've only had people tell me about it, but what I have seen, I saw Darren Brown on Broadway.
Ooh.
And I'm gonna tell you, even though some of the pieces he did in the show are actually on YouTube, and I was expecting them as a magician because I knew the setup already, only for some pieces, obviously. Most of the show is new stuff, but I noticed myself sitting there and just smiling, and I let go everything just because of the fact that it was such an enjoyable and effortless performance to watch. And there was no feeling like I have anything to prove, because that's Darren Brown, dude.
Yeah.
I have nothing to prove by figuring it out.
That is a great point. So I want to correct my initial statement because I did not consider that. So thank you, Matt, for bringing that up. And I would say that to me, the experience of watching magic does not end at the end of the show. To me, the experience starts with the show and then continues for the rest of your life. And as a magician, I would say even during the show, if I'm like, oh, magic, whatever, letting it wash over me, at some point in the future, when I think of it, I will be able to have guesses.
Damn good point.
Educated
Sanjeev,
guesses.
You're a genius. And maybe what I'm about to say is very stupid.
I like
maybe that is the inherent difference between magicians and spectators. Maybe with spectators, the magic starts at the beginning of the show and ends way after the end of the show. But maybe for magicians, it starts before the show.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who said this is not the poetic half? I like that. This is great. That's nice. That's really nice.
And that talks about really expectancy and assumptions and all of that and prior knowledge. I think this is really what the subject boils down to, is our relationship with the concept of magic. And here, I believe, maybe, can we extrapolate this to other art forms? I'm sure if you take, like, when Van Gogh was painting, would painters just watch his paintings and go, you know what? It doesn't matter. It is, to me, this is what perfect looks like. And let me just appreciate the expression as opposed to looking it through the lens of somebody holding a brush. I'm not sure, and I don't know because I don't know about painting.
Yeah, I don't know.
I have some stand-up comic friends. Oh, yeah, go for it, Connor.
Well, I was just gonna say, I feel like, say you're into post-production for movies and stuff like that. My sister's into post-production, and she edits videos all the time. And she talks to me and she tells me where she'll be editing something or she'll be watching a movie. She'll be watching a movie, and the only thing she can focus on are the cuts. Because that's something that, to me, oh my god, right over my head. Doesn't matter what it is. It's like, I don't think about how this was edited or where the cuts are, you know? But that's the only thing she can focus on.
Hey, you know what? There was I love this example because there was a French guy making videos. He actually and he a lot of people know him, and he did a show called Crossed, and his name is in French is Karim Debache, and he would do analysis of movies, and he's a big movie guy, and just by watching his videos so fondly, they're beautiful videos explaining him the techniques of why it was framed like that, why there was a cut there, why there it's I'm sorry I don't know the terms of French, why it was contre-champ as opposed to be direct views, and all those things, and just learning that little bit, now I find myself appreciating some of that, but never I don't appreciate it because of it. See what I mean? So because maybe I've been giving a tool to the point where I can notice when it's amazing, but I'm not good enough at all to tell when it's not amazing.
Yeah. Okay. That's very, very interesting. Magicians make that sort of really explicit.
I mean,
And
is that
it might be a lot more
I think we fall
subtle.
into the fooled versus not dichotomy, which now I think we realize is wrong. Fooled does not make good, not fooled does not make bad. I mean, look at Fool Us, right? Some of the most memorable, brilliant performances to me might not have fooled Penn and Teller, but who cares? I don't even think Penn and Teller care. They say, we apologize that did not fool us because we think that this was beautiful and pushes the art of magic forward, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that maybe it's in what Alex said. Maybe it's in the word amazing, that we don't know what within that art form constitutes amazing, and so we're not able to decide what fits within that bubble. And
because I don't think anything constitutes amazing. It causes amazing, and to some people, I mean, there's a bunch of things I'm sure I consider amazing. You guys probably consider like meh, or vice versa. So I go, well, you know what? I don't think that's very good. I go, and it's probably because the person saying amazing is probably seeing more than the other.
Yeah.
And somebody's just not considering it, but just flies completely over your head, going, no. And suddenly when you start looking like, oh shit, there's way more than what I thought.
Question for Alex. So do you think that our goal, like that one of our goals as magicians to move the art forward is to bring, for lack of a better term, lay people in to see our side as well, so that they can maybe gain an appreciation similar to us of the intricacies of the form, and then hopefully also be able to maybe better distinguish what makes good magic, what doesn't, as vague as all the words in that sentence was?
That might be a path. That might be a path.
Short answer, yes. Now let me move forward. If I had the opportunity to give the tools to understand magic the same way Karim Debache gave me tools to understand that tiny bit about movie structure,
editing,
I would love it. I would do it any day of the week. And even furthermost, I think we don't risk much, because I think giving them too many tools is better than not giving them enough. Like, honestly, if all of your ACAN performance, I'm sorry for the non-magicians here, but if all your ACAN performances could be as memorable as Burglass's, like, this was so memorable, people were writing books about how insane that was without having nothing to do with how it was done. Now, if you could just tap a little bit into that potential. Now, of course, you're never going to explain all the methods, the secrets, the gaps, the psychological subtleties. But what if they knew just a little more to understand that, wow, this is breaking. The very little I know, this is, wow.
Doesn't that come back to the public perception of magic?
I think it does. So this episode has been pointing back to a lot of things. I like it.
But it's also going back to those what ifs, because now it's all racing through my mind. I'm thinking now, wow, what if I did a piece that just straight up revealed something that allowed them to appreciate the next thing I'm about to
Penn and Teller's Cups and Balls.
There you go.
Yeah.
And they're ball and vase.
But those are like explicit tools. I'm more thinking implicit tools, where you're not explicitly, you're not bringing them into a classroom. Say, okay, so this is where the card is supposed to be, and then you put it here. It's more implicit tools where you're sort of giving them an understanding of going, this is not like any magic trick I've seen before.
No, I think that we see that in so many other places. Like, think of those laymen who've seen maybe a couple YouTube videos about some magic, maybe like a basic ACAN or whatnot. When they see a Burglass, for just to use the same example, they're like, oh, I know how ACAN is done, but he didn't even touch the cards. And that's
exactly, because now they have that little bit of understanding. And here it is a method related understanding.
Yes.
But I hope that eventually maybe we can give them
show
all-
structure, emotional understanding,
Exactly.
storytelling. Oh my god!
But you see, we're nearing the end, and I'm normally the one telling you all to shut up, but I want to say something. The beauty of hosting. I think that just giving them those tools, I can see the benefits for sure. But on the other hand, I think it might have been on the previous episode that we touched this. The recording session is melding together. When you pull out cards, how many times have you heard, "Oh, a card trick, I've seen that one."
Yeah.
Well,
So-
that would allow to break that.
Yeah.
Well,
We
they're going,
raised
oh, there's
their
so many
bar.
cards. What's he gonna do?
Yeah.
And now he's gonna
Yeah,
appreciate more.
yeah.
What's he gonna do?
Because again, like Alex mentioned on a long forgotten episode, every performance adds a data point to the public perception of Magic. Every single new card trick they see now makes them question oh, have I seen this before? Because I've just seen like 8 different versions. And if they're forgettable and all just card tricks, that's a Magic issue, right? We're not bringing that in as a factor. And I would attribute a lot of our risk-freeness, a lot of our hesitation to do this as our secret fetish, as our just need to, all secrets are ours. And maybe that even connects to how we don't like to work, because when methods are exposed, we need to come up with newer, better ones, and innovating is effort.
Yeah.
We
think that's
could
good
definitely
to-
close on that. I think that's the perfect closing thought. But before we close the podcast, we have our final segment.
Wait a second. I'm supposed to. This is my subject.
Do you want to say?
No, honestly,
final words?
Sanjeev said all the contents, like all the gist of it, and I couldn't say it any better. But I just wanted to say that I brought this subject forward, sort of an excuse to talk about the relationship we have with magic, of the very concept of magic. And I'm very happy where it led us. We got to talk about opportunities, other art forms. So I put this out there saying, okay, I hope we have enough to talk about because we feel about this thing, and I could not be happier.
Good topic, man. I always hate your topics going in, and I love
honestly,
them going
I
out.
hope we can get more topics that relate to this issue of our relationship with magic, because this was great.
I think it was. Well, our assembly for today is with Mr. Matthew O'Neill.
Yeah, we were talking about being able to look at an art through the perspective of the artist. Either you recognizing that you look at it through your own perspective of your own art or somebody else's. And a way to do that is to look at it through almost a niche video, not something that's easy to digest for somebody who's not into it, but like dive in. For example, I personally have been really getting into playing chess, and I watched a few sort of intro videos, but then I started diving deep into like crazy chess YouTubers, and I don't understand a thing, but it is so cool. And here's the thing I'm going to recommend. It's a YouTube channel called Kuma Films. And what they do is they have a bunch of people with various hobbies. They tend to be more on the, the juggling side. What's the category for juggling? If you guys...
Physical
arts?
dexterity?
Circus arts?
I don't know.
I think normally they're categorized that way.
Physical stuff. So it is some juggling. It's butterfly knife twirling. Actually, a good friend of mine got featured on Kuma Films, and he does butterfly knife flipping.
Do you want to give him a shout out since you were on air?
An associate of mine. I don't know if I say friend. We didn't really talk.
No,
but
if
he was
you don't
popular in
want to
school
say his
and I
name, that's all good.
wasn't. But and
is
then various
funny.
others, they do contact juggling, and various other things, and that's sort of able to look at, hey, these are experts in their specific field, and
Nice.
it's just very cool to be able to I guess binge just a bunch of back-to-back different really cool art forms that you might not have even known existed before.
YouTube, man. YouTube's great.
YouTube's amazing.
Powerful too. Tool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you,
Thank you,
gentlemen.
Gonzalo. Gentlemen!
My final points are, as always, come follow us on the socials and interact with us at Ungimmick.
Sure, with
you
a
know
phone.
that we are on patreon.com/ungimmick. Listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts, and tune in next week for another episode
Of Ungimmicked.